Hi folks, I hope all of you are having a good week so far. The two lectures for this week are going to be over MLA citation. This lecture is going to be over the development of in-text citations. Now let me point out that the next lecture will be on the development of a works cited page. Because when you follow the MLA citation rules, as we want you to do for this course and for many other courses, you always have to have both those things, your in-text citations and a works cited page that appears at the end of your essay. So again, this is going to focus on the in-text citations, the next one on your works cited page. Now, in this PowerPoint, I give you kind of a laundry list of the main rules for in-text citations. And then right below this uh, lecture, in the module where it's located, you're going to see a document either labeled in-text citations or sample in-text citations, because it's going to give you visual demonstrations of the three main in-text citation types that I talk about here. So, either as you're listening to and watching this lecture or immediately afterwards, be sure to look at that handout as well, because the two things are going to work kind of hand in hand. If you just look at the rules, it's probably not going to make a whole lot of sense. And conversely, if you just look at the handout without understanding the rules that led to the production of those examples, also probably not going to make that much sense. So remember to do both. Okay, so before I start going over the three main types of in-text citations, let me just begin the discussion of in-text citations by pointing out why it's important to at least attempt to properly cite your sources when you use any kind of information that did not come from first-hand knowledge, or what could be called common knowledge. Remember that the one thing that we have in common, whether you're a teacher like me or a student like many of you, the one thing that we all have in common at this moment is that we're all part of a college/university system. And in colleges, universities, branch campuses, whatever the case might be, our business, our product is the production of ideas. If you want to think about it in kind of manufacturing terms. So, because our job is to produce new ideas or to discover old ideas that had been either forgotten altogether or maybe kind of pushed to the wayside over time. Um, when someone plagiarizes information, in other words, does not try to cite their source at all, or perhaps just cites it in a really bad manner that doesn't follow the proper format, they run the risk of being charged with plagiarism. Now, if you don't cite your sources and you are charged with plagiarism, there are a whole range of penalties that go along with that. At the very lowest end of the spectrum, sometimes the professor will just let you off with a warning, but generally, on a first offense, if you're convicted of plagiarism, you'll fail that particular assignment. Sometimes, even on a first offense, if it's a really blatant example of plagiarism, and if it's after the instructor has gone over these kind of rules with you. If Even if it is first offense, there is a possibility that you could be given a failing grade in that course, and then later on, if you do it again at the same university, or perhaps at another one that you go to later, if you're convicted of multiple plagiarism offenses, usually by the third strike, that's when you really had to worry about getting expelled. So that, again, I don't want to scare any of you, but that's why it's important to always make your best attempt to properly cite your sources. Okay, so when I talk to you about MLA citations, and when I talk to you about in-text citations using MLA, I'm really talking to you about citing three different kinds of information within the body of your essay. It can also be in the conclusion and in the introduction, but usually when we worry about in-text citations, it's more in the body paragraph. So anyway, the three kinds of in-text citations are in-text citations of a standard quote, in-text citation of a block quote, and in-text citation of a plot summary or paraphrase. So first, here are the guidelines for when we cite a standard quote. Here are some of the guidelines. There are a little more after that. So what do I mean, first of all, when I say standard quote? Well, when you follow the MLA rules, a standard quote is any quote that when you type it out occupies 3 lines or less on your page. Now notice that I didn't say, 3 sentences or less. That's usually a big point of confusion. If the sentences are short, you can very well and very easily, have them still be all part of a block quote. Because, again, the guideline is for a standard quote, excuse me. But remember, the guideline for a standard quote is that when you type out that information from your source, that it's going to occupy or take up 3 lines or less on the page. So, when we type out that information as a standard quote, because you are just going to type it into the flow of your paragraph at that point, the ways that you show your reader that you're taking information from an outside source are as follows. First, as I'm sure many of you already know, whenever you're doing a standard quote, regardless of the citation method, whether it's MLA, APA, or Chicago style, you always put the words that you're copying from another source in quotation marks. In other words, you'll put a quotation mark before the first word that you're copying from an outside source, and then you would put a closing quotation mark right after the last word that you're copying from that outside source. Now, after the quote itself, you'll have what we call the in-text citation. That's the information in parentheses right after the quote itself. So, when you're citing a standard quote, if the author's name appeared like at the beginning of the quote, namely in the introduction of the quote before the quote actually started, or in some cases if you use the author's name may be in the sentence before. Then when you do the in-text citation, you would just need to put the involved page number or page numbers in parentheses right after the quote, and then that would be followed by a period. If, however, the author's name does not appear relatively close to the quote itself in the introduction to the quote or the sentence before, then you also need to include that person's last name before the involved page number or page numbers in the in-text citation. And then, after the in-text citation, you would have a period. So remember, with standard quotes, the template that you're always going to follow, and this is demonstrated on the handout, is that you present the quote, give the in-text citation, and then a period at the end of it. Okay? So, here are a couple more little, or one more thing to be aware of when it comes to standard quotes. If the sentence that you're quoting ends in a question mark, you would present the quote, put the question mark inside the quote, do the in-text citation, and let me just point that out to you real quick so that you can see what I mean. This would be the in-text citation and then a period. Now, as I just told you, if the author's name was not used relatively close to this quote, then you would do the author's last name or last names before the page number and then the period here. Okay? So, block quotes. What do I mean when I say a block quote? Well, a block quote is any quote that when you type it out occupies 4 lines or more on the page. Okay? So, when you format a block quote, first, when you start the quote itself, one thing that I don't have on the screen there is that you do need to hit enter and start the block quote on a new line, and then when you're actually, copying the words from that source, the one thing that you always need to do with a block quote in MLA is indent the entire left margin of the quote 1 inch. Now, notice that I say the entire left margin. It's not like when you indent the first line of a new paragraph half an inch. In this case, again, the entire left margin of a block quote is going to be indented 1 inch. Also, unless the block quote that you're developing consists of more than one paragraph, the first line of your block quote is not going to be indented any more than that 1 inch that the rest of the margin is. If, however, let's say you're quoting 2 paragraphs, then just so you know, the top line of the first quote, the first paragraph, would just be the 1 inch over, but then when you go on to the first line of the next paragraph, that first line of the second paragraph would be indented an additional 1/4 inch. Not a half inch like normal, but a 1/4 inch. Okay? So that's just a side note there. But because you've indented the left margin 1 inch, you do not put quotation marks around a block quote. Again, what shows the reader that you're dealing with a quote, someone else's words in this instance, is that you you indent that left margin over 1 inch. Therefore, it's not necessary to put um, quotation marks around a block quote. Now, if one of the ways that block quotes differ from standard quotes, remember I just told you that the template for standard quotes is always going to be present the quote itself, in-text citation, and then a period. When you're citing um, a block quote, those last two parts get reversed in that you're going to have the content that you're quoting, a period, and then an in-text citation. So you're going to reverse those last two parts. And again, this is demonstrated in that handout that I gave you, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. And the other thing that you need to be aware of is that when you're following the MLA guidelines, do not end or begin a paragraph with a block quote, particularly ending a paragraph with a block quote you don't want to do. You always want to give something after it, a little something at least, whether you just move on to the next point, maybe explain the content of the block quote, summarize it, or whatever you feel is necessary. But again, before you go on to your next paragraph, don't end a paragraph with a block quote. Okay? So, what happened there? We lost it temporarily. Oh my gosh, we're back. I'm sorry. I think that it was a Windows 8 snafu, folks. I apologize. But for those of you who have Windows 8, you know that it does weird little things like that. So let's see. Okay, good. It went on to my last thing here, or one of my last things. So, plot summaries. Now, plot summaries, in many ways, you're going to treat them as you would a standard quote, in that you're just going to type the content into the flow of your paragraph, except because at this point you're not directly copying anyone else's words. You don't put anything in quotes. The other way, however, that it is like a standard quote is that you're going to go back to following that template of presenting the information, and then the in-text citation, and then a period. As I said a little bit ago, the only time that the period at the end of your content is going to come before the in-text citation is when you're dealing with a block quote. So again, it's like a standard quote in that you're going to follow that template of presenting your content, giving the in-text citation, that's the information in parentheses, and then your period at the end of the last sentence. Okay? So, internet sources. Internet sources, citing them with MLA is admittedly a tricky thing, in part because the MLA, it seems, is constantly changing, or as they like to call it, refining how we cite internet sources. Now, to a degree, I understand that, because internet-based content is constantly being presented in new and different ways. So I understand that we need to adapt to those new environments for processing information. But I also understand that, because the guidelines do constantly change, that it can be confusing for not just students, but professors like myself. So let me go over some of the main guidelines, and then at the end I'll tell you how the guidelines that I gave you differ a little bit from what the hard and fast MLA mandates are now, or suggestions, I should say. Now, okay, back to the slide. I dovetailed a little bit again there, but hopefully the information that I just mumbled out to you was at least vaguely helpful. So, when you do an in-text citation of an internet source, and let me just comment briefly by saying when I use that term or when another professor uses the term internet source, we are referring to information that you would get from an outlet like Google or Yahoo or Bing. So, anyways, you typed in your search term and then, you got out that information. That's different from using, like Ohio Link or something like Academic Search Complete. But I'll talk to you about those differences more in the near future when we talk about academic research. So, again, that's what I mean by internet sources. So, again, when you do your in-text citation of an internet source, what I would want you to provide is the author's last name of the person who produced that source in parentheses in the in-text citation. Now, if the internet source that you're dealing with had numbered the paragraphs for you, then you would provide the relevant paragraph number or numbers as well. But if the paragraphs weren't pre-numbered for you, don't worry about counting them up. You used to actually have to do that for any internet source, even if they weren't numbered, and it was kind of tedious. But to be honest with you, teachers like me actually preferred that method because it gave a really precise information of where in the article you got the information from. Now, I realize that it can be very difficult to do that, especially if it was a long article. So I don't mandate it as we once did, but I want you to be aware that if they are numbered for you, you would include that information as well. Now, if the source that you're citing from the internet does not have the name of a person or a corporation listed as the author, I want you to be aware of a couple things. First, and we'll talk about this more when we go over academic research, but think of it this way. If the person or company that produced that information isn't willing to attach their name to it, how confident should you be in the believability, in the value of that source? Now, if after you've thought about it on your own, or possibly, and if you want to, I really recommend it, if you run into that situation, have me look at the source with you, and I'll be glad to help you evaluate it. But let's say that after you've gone over it on your own and you've checked it with me, you're still comfortable with using that source. What you would do in terms of the in-text citation then would be to put a shortened version of the article's title in the in-text citation, followed by the relevant paragraph numbers, again, if they're provided. So let's say you're citing an internet article called "The Rise of Democracy." Look at the kind of template that I gave you. Now this would be a template again for the citation of a standard quote from your internet source. Because look, you've got, and let me pull up my pointer here, you've got your quote itself, the in-text citation with the title Democracy, or a shortened version of the title, Democracy, in quotes, followed by the range of paragraphs that were covered by that quote. Apparently here they were very short paragraphs, but, suppose that's neither here nor there. It is, after all, just a quick demonstration. Now, before I go off of this slide, oh darn it, I'm sorry about that. Before I go off of this slide, I want to point out to you real quickly, notice at this point, because you're citing the title of an internet article, that even the shortened version of the title is put in quotes. This allows the reader to distinguish and know that you're citing an article that did not have an author or a corporation's name attached to it, as opposed to an actual person's name. Like, let's say, for instance, sounds weird, but let's say the person's name was Christopher Democracy. Oh man, can you imagine what it'd be like going through life with a name like that? Now you watch, at some point down the line, I'm gonna have a student named Christopher Democracy, and they're gonna listen to this, and they're gonna be mad at me, and there's gonna be an uproar. I can just feel it. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent once again. I apologize. It's a bad habit. I'll work on it, I promise. But again, here are the quotation marks allow you to distinguish between a shortened version of a title versus, a person or a corporation's name. Now, if by chance you were citing like a longer internet work, like a whole book or a whole album at once, instead of being in quotes, that shortened title, even if it is just a shortened title, would be italicized. But that's something that I'll go over more in the next lecture on MLA citation, but I wanted you to be aware of that wrinkle nonetheless. Okay, so I think this is my last slide coming up. Okay. Yep, it is. So, as always, contact me for help. Look at the handout, like I said at the beginning, that goes along with it. And then try, as you go through this course, to vary your in-text citation methods. I want to see by the end of this course, one of the ways that I evaluate whether or not I think you're ready for the next course in the Terra community system is, can this person do well at all three of those citation types? So standard quotes, block quotes, and plot summaries / paraphrases. Do they know how to properly cite and format all those? If not, I probably wouldn't, hold a person back from the next course just for that one reason, assuming that was the only reason. But it would give me, reason to pause and think about whether or not to promote you to the next level. So for your sake, get that practice in as we go through the course and as you revise your earlier work. Because again, I really want to see for your own benefit that you know how to handle all of these citation types. But that's enough for now. As I said a little bit ago, if you have any questions or concerns, need help, contact me, folks. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you. I want you to do well. So, anyway, take care. Have a nice day. and I'm going to start to back out of this. So as I'm doing that, again, try to think happy thoughts. If you're a dog lover, think of dogs. Cat lover, think of cats. So on and so forth. I'm just trying to eliminate the tedium of watching me stop this recording. So anyway, I'm going to stop in 1, 2, and 3. Have a nice day. Bye.